Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Northwest ATTC webinar. I'm Jennifer Verbeek, and I'm your host for today. We're excited to have Mallori DeSalle presenting for us today on how humor helps, using therapeutic humor to support clients. Next slide, please. We have a couple of quick housekeeping things to go over. First, if you have any questions for our presenter, please type them into the chat box at any time. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can throughout the presentation, and whatever ones we aren't able to get to, we'll save for the end. Next slide. You'll be getting an email at the end of today's webinar that has a link to a survey in it. Please take that survey, as it makes sure that we can bring you the content you're interested in. And it also helps us continue offering free or low-cost events such as this one. That email will also have a link to download the slides from today and a link to our website where you'll be able to find a recording of the webinar, and that should be available later this afternoon. Next slide. Yeah. We'll also be sending everyone who attends this live webinar a certificate of attendance, and it takes us about a week to get those out. You don't need to do anything to get the certificate unless you're watching this in a group. And if that's the case, please have someone in the group email us within a business day with the names and email addresses for everyone who wants the certificate. And you'll see our email address up there on the slide. It's northwest@attcnetwork.org. Next slide. Now on to our webinar. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today. We have Mallori DeSalle, who is a licensed mental health counselor, nationally certified counselor, and a certified humor professional. Her passion for creating a lasting impact led her to the public health field, and for the last 15 years, she has worked at Prevention Insights, which is a center within the School of Public Health at Indiana University. And she has also been featured as a TEDx speaker back in 2021. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Mallori. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Oh, and I think you're still muted.
Yeah, well, the joke's on you, right? Because now we got it out of the way. No one has to say you're on mute now. So thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Meg, and for everyone else in the Northwest ATTC. And I just wanted to offer this tribal land acknowledgement, and in applying a lens of cultural humility to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Northwest ATTC offers this land acknowledgement for today's event. Our work intends to reach the addiction workforce in HHS Region 10, including Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And this area rests on traditional territories of many indigenous nations, including tribal groups with whom the United States signed treaties prior to the granting of statehood. So I invite you to join us in supporting these efforts to affirm tribal sovereignty and in displaying respect and gratitude for our indigenous neighbors. So thank you, ATTC, for providing that tribal land acknowledgement for us today. And hi again, welcome. I am so glad everyone is here with me. I'm looking at the numbers tick up on the participant list, and that's pretty exciting since I thought only my mom would be attending today. Just a little joke to start us off. It might not be that funny, but it does certainly make me laugh. So you have come to the right place if you came to How Humor Helps, using therapeutic humor to support clients. And so Jennifer just introduced me a little bit, and I want to give you all just a very formal introduction into myself.
Mallori DeSalle is a lifetime learner and listener. Reminded by her mom when she was a child that we only have one mouth but two ears, Mallori has used her ears to listen better her whole life. When asked about her excellence in listening, she said, "What was that?" And listen to this. Mallori's proudest accomplishment so far has been tasting nearly 100 Oreos from across the globe. Mallori says, "I don't judge a cookie by the outside. It's really what's on the inside that counts." Often integrating humor into counseling, training, and conversations about change, Mallory hopes to inspire people to be creative, curious, and kind. Mallori Milk and Cookies DeSalle is always ready to laugh, learn, and listen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please put down your cookies and welcome Mallori DeSalle.
So I told our colleagues from the ATTC before we got started that I would be bringing in a little bit about Oreos. So that is me. And now I want to learn a little bit more about all of you. Now, certainly now that we have more than 100 people on today's webinar, we can't go around the room and do introductions. But I do want to introduce each of you to all of us, but not just who you are, your professional self, the self that you have on your business card, but I'd like to start introducing all of you to how you can introduce therapeutic humor into conversations that you have with clients right away. And that's by you introducing yourself with your absurdity name, your silly name, your funny name. So we are going to play a game very quickly called Say My Name, Say My Name. And yes, I am a child of the 80s and 90s, so that does sound like one of your favorite songs. So what is this game called Say My Name? Here's what you are going to do. So get your typing fingers ready and get poised in the chat box. So in the chat box, you are going to type your new name, the new name that you are going to pretend to use throughout today's webinar. And this is how you're going to come up with your new absurd name. Your absurd name might be a title like Her Royal Highness, and your favorite food, like double stuff Oreos. So you might call yourself Her Royal Highness Double Stuff. Or you could choose to use the word Lil and your favorite drink. If it was me, it'd be Lil Latte. And you could also choose to use your pet's name and a piece of clothing and then tag on the word bottom. So Indie Sock Bottom at your service. Or for those of you that are just creative and absurd on your own, you can make up your own wacky name. And so just go ahead and use the chat box right now. And I'm going to be pulling up the chat box and taking a look to see what you have come up with. And let's take a look of how creative and excitable you are. All right, we have Bedbug Boots Bottom. Thank you very much. Or Cool Pop Fuzz Bottom. Or Oreo Pants Bottom. Oscar Sweater Bottom. Phoebe Tank Bottom. We have a theme here, friends. Your name is Lil Coke or Collector of Mate's Poo. Heather, I see you. I see you, Collector. I see you. We have Chocolate Queen. We have Spruce Pants Bottom, the Honorable Judge Pizza Roll checking in. What up? So keep putting all of your ridiculous names in there. Princess Mac and Cheese, I got you. Oliver Shoe Bottom, Brownie Shirt Bottom. Scroll through all of these names and which one of these makes you laugh? I'm curious, what is it like to take off your official name, your official credentials, and put this absolutely absurd name in the chat box? Go ahead and go through it and click some likes on it and let us know how you feel. But what we know when we introduce ourselves to our clients in a way that is unexpected and invites some collaboration and creativity as we really take down the anxiety and stress and we take up the fun and playfulness. And we create an environment that sets the stage for anything can happen here, including curative space. So the webinar today is focused on humor, but I've set out 3 particular learning objectives. And the first thing that we're going to do here is compare and contrast the psychological impacts of comedy versus humor and really kind of talk about what therapeutic humor is specifically. We're also going to distinguish methods for utilizing humor with clients that foster therapeutic relationships. And finally, but certainly not least importantly, we're going to identify risks and solutions for using humor in therapy. Now, all of this sounds really technical. So I want you to know that even though this is a webinar and I don't hear all of your voices, I want you to be smiling and laughing, because what we're doing here is we are creating an exchange of oxytocin, an exchange of ideas, and an exchange of expertise. So keep working in that chat box. As I can see, my lady watermelon, you are ready to go. So keep up the funny in the chat box. Man, you guys are great at this name game. All right, so let's go. I want to know what all of you define as humor. Okay, so this is another audience participation question. What do you think humor is? Go ahead and start typing in the chat box. I know, Jody, you missed the first question. It's put in your funny name. But now tell me, what is humor? And I see it here. I see people saying, you know, humor is something that uplifts the soul. It's the clash of absurdities. Up top on that one. I like it. It's when we stay lighthearted. It might just be a technique for diffusing tension, or maybe we can use it to bond. Absolutely. Ooh, it generates a belly laugh. I like it. So when we define humor as a whole, as you can tell in the chat box, and keep it coming, we often have many different things that we go, ah, that's humor. That's funny. A lot of times people say comedy is humor, and I'm not funny. I can't tell jokes, so I can't possibly use humor in therapy with my clients. And I don't know what to say. What if I hurt their feelings? But the truth is humor is far more than telling jokes. Peter McGraw defines humor as the benign violation of the norm that surprises you. Yes, exactly, Ken. You got it. Something that makes you have a surprise tends to be pretty humorous. And it does, Efren. It gives us a sense of smile and laughter. It gives us a reaction. So here's one of the really important things here. Humor is benign. Comedy can at times not be benign. Now, let's take the word benign and separate it from everything else, because we know the term benign is often used in medicine, and it often means is free from harm or free from illness. And so when we think about humor being a violation of the norm that surprises us, that's great. It often can happen when somebody says something shocking. And it's something that we can't believe they said. If you think about some of the most famous comedians, they say things that we are shocked they said out loud, and it makes us laugh. And yet, if it's said about us, or we feel as though we are violated in the surprise, it is not benign. So humor as a whole is quite broad and universal. Comedy has some specific limits. The goal is to entertain, to shock, to awe. But what is the difference between humor and therapeutic humor? I love that, Sarah, that you're saying humor means being able to laugh at yourself. And that's exactly right, Rose. 4-year-olds are extremely funny because they don't follow the norm. So what is therapeutic humor? If we were to say, okay, we got what comedy is a form of entertainment that includes humor, but sometimes can cause harm and risk. And humor without harm is fairly benign, but what makes it therapeutic? So the intention underlying therapeutic humor is that it leads to the relief of pain or stress, and that it improves one's well-being. There's a body of research from Stanford University that indicates that comedy And humor can have two different impacts on our bodies. If we use a sense of therapeutic humor, we're able to use humor in a way that relieves our stress and discomfort, and the body keeps that sustained comfort and softness longer than if we use something like sarcasm or gallows humor, dark humor. So, though all humor surprises us, only therapeutic humor relieves pain and stress in a way that sustains us long enough to improve our well being. So, yes, you are right. Therapeutic humor helps us move through a difficult feeling. And let's peel that apart even just a little bit more through a couple of activities, because you're like, okay, Mallory, does that mean I tell my clients jokes? Not necessarily, maybe. But really, what I'm going to invite all of you is to figure out how you can use humor in your life therapeutically, and then bring it into the work that you do in a therapeutic way. It may not always mean that you hold the proverbial microphone telling the jokes, but it might be that you set up the intention that if and when humor is used, it's done so in a way to relieve pain and stress and improve well-being, as opposed to some of the other reasons why someone might tell jokes. So let's build a case for why it's so important that we use therapeutic humor as opposed to just comedy. One of the things that we know is that, guess what, friends? Mental health, and that includes addiction, diagnostic mental health conditions, and just regular old stress, it's everywhere. Friends, one thing I didn't say about myself that I often do in my introduction is that not only am I a therapist, but I also go to therapy. I also seek out pharmacological interventions because I am a client. I live with depression and anxiety, and I manage it every day with exercise, with meditation, and with laughter. And all of us are probably familiar with these statistics, but 1 in every 8 people live with a mental health condition. And it says disorder right here, but I'm just going to say condition. And one of the things that is particularly troubling for all of us, especially those of us in helping professions, is that stress is at an all-time high right now. We know, according to Gallup, that on a daily basis, 44% of us experience some form of workplace stress. 40% of us feel workplace worry. 23% of us feel sadness during the workday, and 21% of us feel angry. These are some big feelings. One of the ways we can address stress, worry, sadness, and frustration or anger is through humor. Now, I'm not saying let's just laugh it off and pretend like our problems aren't real. In fact, that's called avoidance. And I know that some of you are saying, listen here, Mallory, I have some friends that use humor, but they are just using it as a defense mechanism. And I say, I believe you. So how can we use humor on purpose and in a way that is therapeutically? Well, let's try it now. One of the distinguishing differences between therapeutic humor and humor for avoidance is that we want to first notice how we're feeling and notice how we feel different after humor. So I want you to just take 15 seconds and do a quick body scan. How do you feel right now? Feel free to put your current thoughts in the chat box. How do you feel? And it's okay if it's stressed or nervous or distracted. It's also okay if it's like, I'm rock solid, or I'm feeling great, or I'm feeling hungry. Whatever the case may be, I would love to have you share it. Thank you all for just noticing. Just noticing. There's no right or wrong. And so what we're about to do is we're going to use some therapeutic humor. And I want to make a quick distinction. We are about to use laughter. And laughter is a part of therapeutic humor. It is not always required for something to make us laugh for it to be therapeutic humor. And it's not always possible that something is funny in order for us to use therapeutic humor. In other words, laughter is humor, but not all humor has laughter. Okay, I think I made that nice and muddy. But what we're going to do next is I'm going to play a video, and I want you to just sit back and enjoy. And if you feel like it, laugh with it. Here we go. Yes, it's contagious. So do a full body scan again and type it in there. What do you got? What are you feeling now? Is anyone else just have like that feeling in your cheeks that you're like, whoa, I am smiling so hard? So that Skype laugh chain is available on YouTube, and I really invite you to give it a look-see. I just gave you, 20 seconds of it, and there's several minutes and lots of different laughters. And you can see that by intentionally applying humor, which was a benign violation of the norm, by the way, you said, I can feel a shift. And one of the things that you're noticing is that some of you started to laugh too. Here's the thing. We are 30% more likely to laugh when we are around other people, which I think is why it was so hard for us to laugh during COVID, because we were all so far away and everyone's on mute right now. So you can't hear me when I'm laughing, and I can't hear you, and we can't share the laughter together, but it's a vital part of making that connection. So one way that we can apply therapeutic humor with our clients is simply to invite them to take a break, scan their body, and decide, would laughter help in this moment? It might have done nothing for you, and that's okay, because what you're still doing is you're noticing how you feel now and later. And if that didn't suit you, it just meant that that's not your style of humor that helps you. And there's no judgment here. You're just taking away a little bit of observation. Now, I will tell you that after watching that video so many different times, I don't always laugh. I commonly laugh more when I'm in an audience and I show that and I watch them laugh. But if you're not laughing, it might be that you're more of a social laugher and that you need more to get you going. Or, as you said, maybe you're just kind of wondering if it's piled on today and there's a lot of stress. So if you did laugh, or even if you smiled, in fact, even if you didn't laugh, your brain got a little dose of what I'm about to share with you here. First of all, you got some dopamine in your body, and this is the neurotransmitter that most of us love. I mean, I know I love it. I often get dopamine from eating Oreos or from going for a jog or from seeing my kids do what they love. Dopamine is my favorite. But here's the thing about dopamine, particularly when we are working with clients, is dopamine helps our clients remember. And we want our clients to remember therapeutic encounters in a successful way. If every time our clients come into our offices or every time we sit down with a person, they feel stressed and anxious and they remember that, then they are going to build up additional anxiety about the therapeutic environment. So dopamine, by having an exchange of laugh at least a couple of times throughout an encounter, can help them have a remember me moment that remembers positivity. Secondly, one of the things that some of you may have observed in your body is that you felt just a little bit better. It could be that you just got a bunch of oxygen in your lungs from laughing, or maybe it's just you were smiling and your brain was like, whoa, we must be happy here. Or you might have gotten some serotonin. Serotonin is something that our body experiences after laughing, and it often helps us with a sense of wellness. Now, if you're saying, gosh, I felt no different, then that's sort of perhaps a measurement for you that I would invite you to consider. What does it mean to you if maybe your serotonin might need even more than a couple of chuckles? So you might get some dopamine, you might get some serotonin, and you definitely get some endorphins by laughing. You get some more energy, you get some excitement. And so I want to ask you a question here. How many times a day do you think the average preschooler laughs? In the chat box, just go ahead and put the number that you guess. How many times a day do you think the average preschooler laughs? We got 25, 10, 100, we got 50. Yep, we're getting there. Now, everybody take your numbers and at the very least, double it, except for 1,000, except for Jody. Don't do that. But Jody, I like the way you think. We are about looking at, yes, 300. A friend, yes, that's it. The average preschooler laughs about 300 times a day. Now, let's compare that to the average adult. Go ahead and add that in there. So Robert says maybe 8 times. And Jody, oh, maybe you have 1,000-time laughing toddler. So the average adult laughs approximately 4 to 17 times a day. Now, I know that even though I'm in my 40s, I act like I am 120 around kids. And I say, boy, I wish I could bottle that up and take it with me. I hope you understood what I just said. But we want the energy that young kids have. And guess what? Laughing might be one of many explanations for why they have so much energy. If you laugh, you get more energy. And finally, and one of my favorite additive neurotransmitters is oxytocin. So this is particularly valuable in the therapeutic environment because oxytocin is exchanged through laughter. And in fact, this really cool thing happens with mirror neurons, where if I'm laughing, then you want to laugh. And when you want to laugh, I want to laugh. And the more oxytocin I give off when I laugh, the more it builds your oxytocin, and so on and so forth until we have really established an exchange of oxytocin. We commonly hear about oxytocin between infants and their mothers when they're nursing. But we also hear that oxytocin is a relationship building neurotransmitter, and I like to call it the trust neurotransmitter. I want you to think about yourself and your colleagues and your clients and your friends and family. And who do you laugh around the most? If I were to take a guess, my guess would be that you spend the most time laughing around the people that you feel comfortable around, that you trust, and that you enjoy. And so, if that is the case, laughter is a measurement of trust. And I suggest it is also a modality for building trust. So laughing can be a way that you can strengthen existing relationships. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you do that without stepping on any of the risk factors later in the session. But I ask you, do you laugh when you feel safe? Usually the answer is yes. So we want to give our clients an environment where they feel safe. And we also know that talking about change can really bump up the stress. It can really give us a sense of anxiety and nervousness and lots of unpleasant emotions. So one of the things that humor does and laughter does is it takes that stress hormone, cortisol, and it sends it bye-bye. Now, as you've seen in some of our colleagues here, a little bit of laughter isn't taking it all away, and that's okay. We just want to help people know that it's all right to take a respite from feeling all the feelings. Sometimes laughter is not about fixing, solving, and curing. It's just about taking a break. And I love that. Humor is your survival skill. People ask why I laugh and joke so much, and I tell them because I can't cry all the time. That's it, Charles. And sometimes I have heard the phrase, cry until you laugh until you cry. And I have another colleague of mine that says, laugh until you leak. And that one is a little bit more crass, certainly. But what we know is that humor, laughter, and crying are all very related. And I believe that crying and laughter are both catharsis. They're just at two ends of the spectrum. And without crying, there is no laughter. And without laughter, there is no crying. So I'd like to give you a couple of statistics and data points to help ensure that you understand the significance of humor and of laughter, and also so that you can get some CEUs. Humor and laughter help maintain well-being by reframing stressful events. They can be used to help communicate difficult issues, which can often help our clients cope with emotional and physical suffering, sickness, and loss. And research has shown us that using humor and laughter directly after experiencing a stressful situation produces a reduction in stress hormones and creates a lasting positive feeling. In fact, y'all, when practicing humor, muscles become more relaxed, breathing changes, and the brain releases endorphins, which of course we know are all the body's natural painkillers. So a lot of times when I do this particular factoid slide, I invite people to come on and read it using their absurd voice. And I'll save you from that one today. But you can imagine how these serious facts can become much less serious when we take on our absurd persona. So if you're talking with a client and you have some things that you want to talk about that might be a little bit uncomfortable or awkward, you can always think about how can I invite someone to use their absurd self to talk about this. We're absolutely going to share slides with you, Jody, and very generously, Meg and Jennifer will be sending those out after today. So I'm excited to share those with you. One of the things that we know about therapeutic humor specifically is that it helps decrease the experience of unpleasant emotions. And it changes, you see that's a pun right there, it changes the situation itself. These are two different ways that therapeutic humor potentially could change it. And so I'm going to give you a quick story of how I applied therapeutic humor in a pretty traumatic situation for myself. So for me, I have always been someone who wants to be a helping professional, and I also work in the field of motivational interviewing. And so I was traveling for the Motivational Interviewing Annual Conference in Ireland in 2017. And I was in charge of being on the program planning committee. And the night before the conference, I went to bed in my hotel room. And when I woke up, I wasn't in my bed. I found that I was lying on the floor of my hotel bathroom and I had a head injury. This surprise trauma was especially scary to me. And I felt fear. I felt embarrassment. I felt shock, all sorts of unpleasant emotions. And when I was taken to the ambulance to Beaumont Hospital, I told jokes the whole ambulance ride. So some of you might be saying, oh my gosh, is she in shock? Was she okay? In fact, the ambulance driver asked my friend who was with me, is this all right? And she said, no, this is her thing. This is how she copes. And to a degree, what I was doing was I was using humor as a protective blanket for me because I was really struggling to feel the threat, the harm, the shock that I was experiencing. And I was able to use it to protect myself so that I didn't feel so overwhelmed. When I came back from the hospital and had been cared for, I told one more joke to my friend who was sitting in the lobby with me. I said, gee, what I wouldn't do to get a little attention around here. And he said to me, you've got my attention. It was in that moment that my humor that had kept me so safe and helped me pause the unpleasant emotions and change the way I felt about the situation. It was in that moment that I was able to revisit the other feelings on the spectrum, the sadness, the fear, the embarrassment and shock. And I was able to cry for the first time. Now I did cry until I laughed again. And that was an indication to me that humor had done its job. It kept me safe when I was feeling overwhelmed, and it let me show my vulnerability when I was ready. And then it gave me more joy and took away the discomfort when I was ready to move on again. So I will tell you all, just out of full circle, that I am okay. No one has ever been able to explain what happened, but I do have a little scar on my head that reminds me that I use humor to help me get through tough times, and that oftentimes I need to invite myself as well as others to notice how we use humor to keep ourselves safe, but also to help invite vulnerability into the room. Therapeutic humor can help us to do that. So that was one of the ways that I applied it within myself. But how can you take these concepts and bring it into conversations with clients, consumers, co-workers, friends, family, pets? One of the ways that I like to think about humor is, how can I align humor with the necessary components of a therapeutic alliance? And really, I prefer to really reference motivational interviewing when I talk about a therapeutic environment, because within motivational interviewing, there are certain concepts that I believe apply across all therapeutic alliances, including the MI spirit. But first, what I'm going to talk about are how humor aligns with the 4 tasks. So in 2023, Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick brought out a new version of motivational interviewing, helping people grow and change, 4th edition, in which they changed the 4 processes to the 4 tasks. And so the 4 tasks of motivational interviewing will feel familiar to you in terms of the therapeutic environment and change conversations. Engage, focus, evoke change talk, and plan. Now, when it comes to humor, we very much can use humor when we engage. We want to keep it light. We want to use humor to get to know someone, and we want to avoid humor that is particularly personal. However, We might use humor in a slightly different way in order to talk about focus. We might narrow in the jokes or invite the person to joke about or laugh when talking about more challenging things, when picking the one item that we want to address. When we start looking at change talk or really trying to build up motivation, we might sometimes need to use humor to help us get through the discomfort of managing our ambivalence, which is also a term on the screen. And when it comes to planning, oftentimes we end up planning something and it goes wrong and we make mistakes, or we learn, darn it, we learn. And so using humor to address falling forward can help us laugh even when we feel like we aren't being fully successful. As I mentioned, MI has the spirit, and that is inclusive of partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And when we are using humor and we are doing so through partnership, we are doing so in a way that does not other someone. Othering our clients, or using directive language or acting in charge or judging, can oftentimes feel like making jokes about you instead of you making jokes about yourself. Or it might be me belittling or making some judgments in the form of a joke. We want to really stay true to the spirit of MI anytime we use humor, which means we never take the expert role. We always demonstrate acceptance and lack of judgment, and we invite our client to share in a way that's empowering and compassionate. We can use our skills, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries to bring jokes out from within our clients, or to even be sort of silly. And really, ambivalence in and of itself is quite humorous. It's absurd. Can you believe it that at times I both want something and I don't want something? That's ridiculous. Sometimes we can even just poke fun of the fact that we are stuck. So therapeutic humor can be done so very successfully when you do so in a mindset of motivational interviewing and you are intentional with how you apply it. As you see right here, I want to reiterate that it's normal for things to feel conflicted, for us to feel challenged, and normal is pretty funny. We want to stop drinking, and yet I really want to keep drinking. I could go to parenting classes, but parenting classes are really tough to get to. All of these things are absolutely ridiculous. How could it possibly be true? It's like saying I'm tall and short. It's laughable. So instead of asking our clients to judge their ambivalence, we want to ask them to laugh with their ambivalence, point out how absurd it is, point out how ridiculous it is. And just instead of judging, point out that how absurdity helps us find acceptance in change. So here's a couple other things. Much like eliciting change talk and motivational interviewing, discussing ideas on truth, like in DBT, or welcoming feelings, like in acceptance and commitment therapy, laughter can help our clients hear the change potential in their own view or problem. So you can see here that I'm trying to compare how humor can be as effective or really emulate some other best practice methods like MI, ACT, or DBT. We know that sharing laughter and exchanging that oxytocin is a way that we can exchange empathy. You know, when someone else laughs with you at something, it really feels like you're not alone. And by inviting other people to explore alternative perspectives, we can help them take a deep breath and avoid judging themselves. Remember, we are inviting our clients to have a different conversation about change with themselves. And if we can ask them to laugh with themselves and tell themselves this joke while they're in with us, then they are possibly going to tell themselves a joke when they walk away from us. And that is going to help them really find some resolution to the conflict inside themselves. It is so hard, and yet we see what happens. We invite them to give it a go. So we've just talked about what therapeutic humor is, how it's not comedy. We've tried a couple of exercises. You've renamed yourself. You've done some laughter. We've learned about the physiological responses and a couple of factoids, but hold on, Mallory. You said we talk about risks. So in the chat box, tell me, what are you afraid of? What are the biggest concerns you have about using humor with the people that you work with? I know everyone has some potential ambivalence. And again, that's okay. We want to use humor. We don't want to use humor. In fact, I am right there with you. All right. So these are great. Love it. So you're saying things like, gosh, people might think that I'm being offensive, or I might not make them laugh, or perhaps I might say something that hurts the therapeutic relationship, or maybe it will seem like I am minimizing their behavior, or, yep, what if they don't get your joke? Boy, it's like you live in my house because I get it. I have all of these things happen from time to time. So these are all really important risks to pay attention to and to know they exist. And by simply addressing that these are the risks, you can do your best to work around them. I have to be honest with you by saying that there is no guarantee that you will not make a mistake or learn with your client. And I will also say that it is up to you whether or not and how and when you choose to use it. So you may find that you try it in places where you don't feel like the risk is as high. So I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations for ways to decide to humor or not to humor. So here are the ways that I make decisions about humor. And I got to be honest with you, I use it differently at work than I do at play, though I do use these rules often with the way I use it in both places. First of all, depending on your role, you may be worried about whether or not humor might be a distraction from a therapeutic goal, a distraction from doing your work. So if humor is being used to get in the way or distract, it's not a great time to use it. However, humor as a strategy for inaction or to spark a conversation or get the room going, if it's used for the purpose of engagement, then absolutely it can be helpful. Laugh at versus laugh with. Now, this one feels a bit obvious. However, one of the things that we do sometimes accidentally is we laugh at other people when they aren't in the room. So we might say, oh, you know, Frida, who works in cubicle 4, well, doesn't she smell like noodles? I don't know. That's not even funny. And then, yeah, and they all laugh. But what you're actually communicating is that if you leave the room, someone else gets to laugh at you. Instead, this is where benign comes in and is very important. Whatever is being laughed about needs to be something that you can laugh with, not at. You can laugh with someone about a situation, but not laughing at a person or a result can sometimes be challenging. So laughing with versus laughing at is a huge deterrent for deciding whether or not humor will be effective. Clients who hear you making fun of other people, even in your own session, are going to be less likely to joke around in conversations about change because there is an underlying message that as soon as you leave, I might joke about you. That's also where power comes in. You're exactly right. So we have to be challenged to avoid any power differential in the laughing at. And that's why laughing with about situations, circumstances, or things that aren't blamable is far a safer route to go. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, when it comes to therapeutic humor, I believe in the concept of inviting instead of performing. As I shared earlier, comedy is a performance with the goal of entertainment. And when we use humor to dance around the room or to, kind of be the star of the show, we are putting on a performance. And that might be appropriate in certain settings, like in a staff meeting when you're getting everyone's attention, or when your client is telling you a story. They might have a goal of performing. However, in most cases, the safest way to use humor is not to tell a joke at all, but instead to ask your client to make the joke themselves and for you to be a supportive audience member. So what might that look like? Now we're going to do a little exercise here, and then you can take it into the therapeutic realm with your clients. This is an activity I call flipping funny famous quotes. And this is where I take common quotes in movies and I add an absurd word to fill in the blank. Like, I'm the king of the absurd. Keep your friends close, but your blank closer. Life is like a box of blank. To blink and beyond. Houston, we have a blank. You can't handle blank. And may the blank be with you. Feel free to take a look at one of these sentences and write the whole sentence, including the absurd word that you would fill in there, and put it in the chat box. And I'm just going to let you all work on some of these while I tell you how you can use some of these sentences with your clients. So usually what I try and do to help my clients build up a skill set for anything is practice, practice, practice. And the same thing can happen when we are trying to help them practice using humor to get through tough times. So flipping funny famous quotes is a great practice activity because they can do it with anything. Simply put in a nonsensical word like Houston, we have a donut. Or life is like a box of squirrels. See? And these are ridiculous and they're funny and these are fantastic. You can't handle the taste. That's true. COVID couldn't handle the taste. So what does this have to do with therapeutic humor? And aren't we just making ridiculous jokes? Well, we are. We're practicing. But then I might add in something that bothers me or my client so that my client can practice making a punchline out of something that bothers them so they can reframe a challenge. So I'm king of the missed deadlines. Because for instance, I missed a deadline in sending in this PowerPoint. Now, instead of me beating myself up over it, I can just make like I'm the king of deadlines. And I can forgive myself and I can laugh a little bit. So one of the things I do is I use flipping funny famous quotes, and I use them as a way of just pointing out the absurdity that little mistakes can make me get really upset, or I can take some time to make them absurd and give myself a therapeutic break. I'm king of the couch. I like it. Me too. So I know that I am right almost at the end of time, and I want to make sure that I answer any questions that you may have. But before you leave, I would love to have you answer in the chat box How do you think you might use humor? How might you humor your clients? Feel free to enter that into the chat box. There are so many different ways that you can use humor, and I definitely want to ask any questions that you have. But if you do have questions that aren't answered today and aren't given to me after this webinar, I want to make sure that you have a chance to reach out to me on my email address at MalloriDeSalle@gmail.com or my website, MalloriDeSalle.com. And I'm so grateful to all of you for being with us. And I will just hand it off shortly back to Jennifer so she can do the other slide and if there's any extra questions.
Thank you, Mallory. That was really great. It really lifted my spirits. I'm fighting off a cold, so this was like the perfect content. Made me feel a lot better, so thank you. I just have a couple of quick announcements, and then if we have any time for questions, we can kind of get back to some of those. Please remember to fill out the evaluation survey for today's webinar by clicking on the link within the email we'll be sending out later today. And it's also up in the chat box if you can go back and find that. It's up above. And then be sure to join us for our next webinar on April 17th. It's titled Empowering Connections, Unveiling the Transformative Role of Peer Supports. And that will be presented by Dr. Melissa Dittberner. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. This was really fun. I enjoyed going through the comments and reading those. If we have any other questions, feel free to type those in. Otherwise, we can give you back some time here today.
Yeah, all of you are amazing therapeutic humorists, and I really enjoyed getting to read all of the chat box comments. Thank you so much for hanging in and fully humoring with me today.
Looks like we did have one that someone was asking if you ever have it humor backfire using that in the Pacific Northwest, as if it's maybe we have a different sense of humor on this coast.
Well, I think that's a great question. And it's why I really try to invite humor as much as possible, as opposed to deliver jokes. So that's one of the cultural competency notes from using therapeutic humor is to really let the client lead and to notice how that might work. Now, this can be challenging sometimes for individuals that we work with who use humor that maybe can be offensive to us, which is something we didn't really talk about. What if our client uses humor that is offensive or uses jargon that is offensive to us? And this is an environment where you can really practice having challenging conversations about how does this look outside of this therapeutic environment when you make jokes about someone's skin or race or gender. What does that do for you there? How does that affect your relationships? And so you can use humor as an example for potential challenging conversations. And then you can work on negotiating some humor that can be helpful and benign for both of you. Have I told jokes that people don't understand or get? Sure. And again, that's an opportunity for me to apologize, manage the relationship, and practice re-engaging, and to also demonstrate how it looks when I make mistakes and how do I bounce back. So it's not always bad. And at the same time, it means I have to show humility as well. I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think we got to all the questions that came in, and hopefully I didn't miss any. We had a lot of comments saying thank you for your time today and how much people enjoyed your presentation. So I guess we've gotten to all the questions. So everyone have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you, friends.